When Amara Chen throws a Mafia king out of her restaurant for disrespecting her staff, she unknowingly declares war on the most dangerous man in Busan, a man who makes people disappear for far less. But the Frost King doesn't destroy her. Instead, he becomes obsessed with the one woman who refuses to fear him, dragging her into a deadly underworld where her defiance could get them both killed or transform them into something neither expected to become. The plate shattered against the wall, ceramic shards exploding across the polished floor of Mama's table like deadly snowflakes. Amara Chen didn't flinch. She'd seen worse, much worse, in the 5 years since she'd fled Nairobi with nothing but a scarred heart and iron determination. The drunk businessman who'd thrown it stumbled backward, suddenly aware of the lethal silence that had descended over her restaurant. "Get out." Her voice was calm, steady, carrying the weight of every battle she'd fought to build this place from nothing. The man opened his mouth to protest, but something in Amara's dark eyes, something that spoke of survived horrors and conquered demons, made him think better of it. He shuffled out, his friends following with mumbled apologies. Minseo, her server and closest friend in Busan, hurried over with a broom. "One day your courage is going to get you killed," she whispered, her hands trembling slightly as she swept. "Better dead than disrespected," Amara replied, already moving to greet the elderly couple at table 7 with a warm smile that erased all traces of the confrontation. This was her sanctuary, carved out of the chaos of her past. Here, she made the rules. Here, she was safe. But safety, as Amara would soon learn, was an illusion that could shatter as easily as that plate. The temperature in the restaurant seemed to drop when they walked in. 6 men in tailored black suits, moving with the synchronized precision of predators. Conversation died. Chopsticks froze halfway to mouths. Even the sizzle from the kitchen seemed to quiet. Amara looked up from the reservation book and felt her stomach clench, not with fear, but with recognition of danger. The man in the center was different from the others. Younger than she'd expected, perhaps 35, with sharp features that could have been carved from ice. His hair was perfectly styled, his suit probably cost more than her monthly rent, and he wore power like a second skin. Kang Ji-hoon. She'd heard the name whispered in the market, seen vendors pale at its mention. The man who owned half of Busan's underworld and wanted the other half. They didn't wait to be seated. They simply took the best table by the window, the one Amara reserved for her most loyal customers. One of Ji-hoon's men shoved past Minseo without a glance, nearly sending her sprawling. The tray she was carrying tilted dangerously. Amara was moving before she'd consciously decided to. She caught the tray with one hand, steadied Minseo with the other, and turned to face the table of dangerous men with her spine straight and her chin high. "Excuse me," she said, her accent, African mother, Chinese father, raised in Kenya, lending a unique melody to her Korean. "In my restaurant, we treat each other with respect." The 5 lieutenants stared at her as if she'd grown a second head. The background noise didn't just quiet, it vanished completely. Even the kitchen staff had gone silent. Someone was going to die, the atmosphere seemed to say. Probably the crazy African woman who didn't know when to bow. But Kang Ji-hoon simply looked up, and for the first time in what might have been years, genuine surprise flickered across his face. His eyes, cold and calculating as a winter sea, fixed on her with the intensity of a laser. "Respect," he repeated, as if testing the word in his mouth. "In your restaurant." "That's right." Amara didn't move, didn't retreat. She'd learned long ago that predators could smell fear, and she'd decided years ago that she'd rather die on her feet than live on her knees. "You can be powerful anywhere else. Here, you follow my rules. We don't shove. We don't snap fingers at staff. We ask politely, we say please and thank you, and we treat every person in this space as if they matter. Because they do." One of his men stood abruptly, hand moving toward his jacket. Amara's regular customers gasped. Minseo grabbed her arm. whispering urgently, "Amara, please don't." "Sit down, Taemin." Jihoon's voice was quiet, but it carried absolute authority. The man sat immediately, though his glare promised violence. Jihoon continued to study Amara with an expression that might have been amusement or might have been the assessment of a hunter sizing up unexpected prey. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. "Does it matter?" Amara countered. "In here, you're a customer. The same as everyone else." "The same," he repeated softly. Then, incredibly, he smiled, a small, dangerous curve of his lips that didn't reach his eyes. How refreshing. He stood in one fluid motion, and despite herself, Amara tensed. He was tall, she realized, and moved with the controlled grace of someone who knew exactly how much damage his body could inflict. He buttoned his jacket with careful precision. "We'll leave," he said. "But I think we'll be seeing each other again very soon, Miss Chen." Amara Chen. Miss Chen. He spoke her name like he was memorizing it, filing it away in some mental catalog. "I look forward to our next meeting. Perhaps next time, you'll be more accommodating. Perhaps next time, you'll be more respectful," she shot back. His lieutenants looked ready to commit murder on the spot. Jihoon's smile widened fractionally, a predator intrigued by prey that dared to bare its teeth. "We'll see," he said, and walked out. His men followed, shooting looks at Amara that ranged from disbelief to fury to something that might have been pity. The moment the door closed behind them, the restaurant exhaled collectively. Conversation resumed in urgent, frightened whispers. Minseo grabbed both of Amara's arms, her pretty face pale with terror. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" "That was Kang Jihoon, the Frost King. People who disrespect him disappear, Amara. They find them in the harbor, or they don't find them at all." Amara gently removed Minseo's hands from her arms, trying to ignore the trembling that had started in her own fingers now that the adrenaline was fading. "Then they'll find me in my restaurant," Amara said firmly, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. "I didn't survive everything I've survived to bow to another man who thinks fear makes him powerful." Minseo's eyes filled with tears. "This isn't like your ex-husband, Amara. This isn't one man you can escape from. Kang Jihoon owns this city. He owns the police, the politicians, the ports. There's nowhere to run." "Then I won't run," Amara replied, moving to greet a nervous couple hovering by the door. "Welcome to Mama's table. Party of two." But that night, alone in her small apartment above the restaurant, Amara allowed herself to shake. She'd meant every word she'd said, but she wasn't stupid. She knew what men like Kang Jihoon were capable of. She'd married a man who thought he owned her, who'd used his fists to enforce his will, who'd isolated her from everyone she loved. It had taken her 3 years and a broken rib to find the courage to flee Kenya with nothing but the clothes on her back and her grandmother's recipe book. She'd come to South Korea because it was far, far from the man who'd sworn he'd kill her before he'd let her go, far from the shame her family felt about her failed marriage, far from everything familiar. She'd worked 3 jobs, slept 4 hours a night, learned Korean from dramas playing on her phone during subway rides. Everyone she'd saved had gone toward this dream, a place where she was in control, where she decided who came and went, where respect wasn't negotiable. And she'd be damned if she'd let some mafia king take that from her. 3 days later, the first blow came. Her fish supplier, Mr. Park, wouldn't answer her calls. When she went to the market at dawn, he avoided her eyes and said his prices had tripled overnight. Her vegetable vendor claimed he was sold out, though his stall was fully stocked. The butcher she'd used for 5 years suddenly remembered a family emergency and closed his shop the moment he saw her approaching. "What's happening?" she asked Mrs. Lim, the elderly woman who sold herbs and had always treated Amara like a granddaughter. Mrs. Lim pulled her close, whispering urgently. "Word came down from the Frost King. No one is to supply you. Anyone who does will lose their business. Or worse." She pressed a small bundle of green onions into Amara's hands. I'm too old to care what happens to me. But you, child, apologize. Go to him and apologize. Bend your knee before you end up broken. Amara took the green onions with trembling hands and bowed deeply. Thank you, Mrs. Lim. But I can't. Can't or won't. Both. She spent the rest of the day driving to markets in other districts, paying triple prices for inferior products from vendors who didn't know her name or Kang Ji-hoon's decree. By the time she returned to prep for dinner service, she was exhausted and 12,000 won poorer than she should have been. Minseo took one look at her and burst into tears. He's destroying you, she sobbed. Why are you so stubborn? Because the moment I bend, I break, Amara replied quietly. I've been bent before, Minseo. I won't survive it again. That evening, two men in expensive suits sat at the bar. They didn't order food. They didn't speak. They just watched. Amara's regular customers glanced at them nervously, and one by one, they made excuses and left. By 8 o'clock, the restaurant was empty except for the two silent watchers. Amara had served worse audiences. She turned up the music, dimmed the lights slightly, and went about her business as if nothing was wrong. But when she locked up at 11 and stepped into the alley behind her restaurant, she found one of the men waiting by her car. Miss Chen, he said politely. Too politely. Mr. Kong would like to extend an invitation. Dinner. Tomorrow night. The Frost Club. Tell Mr. Kong I'm not available, Amara replied. He's clutched tight enough to hurt. Mr. Kong doesn't invite twice. Then I suppose this will be the first time. She moved toward her car, but the man stepped into her path. Not touching her, not threatening overtly, but the message was clear. You don't understand the situation you're in, he said, and now his politeness had an edge. The Frost King has been patient. But patience has limits. Accept the invitation, Miss Chen. It would be unfortunate if something happened to this lovely restaurant. Old buildings, they catch fire so easily. Rage, white-hot and familiar, flooded through Amara. This was how it always started. The threats. The intimidation. The slow erosion of choice until you believed you had none. She'd lived this before, and she'd sworn never again. You tell your Frost King, she said, her voice low and shaking with fury, that if he wants to talk to me, he can come himself. Like a man. Not hide behind his dogs. The man's expression darkened. You're making a mistake. Then it's my mistake to make. Now get out of my way. He stared at her for a long moment, then stepped aside. You've been warned, he said as she got into her car with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Amara drove home with tears streaming down her face, not from fear, though fear was there, cold and heavy in her chest. She cried from exhaustion, from the unfairness of it all, from the bitter knowledge that some battles never truly ended. They just changed venues and opponents. But by the time she parked, she'd made her decision. If Kang Ji-hoon wanted a war, she'd give him one. She might lose, she probably would lose, but she'd lose on her feet, fighting, not on her knees, begging. The next morning, Amara Chen walked into the Frost Club wearing her best dress and her grandmother's gold earrings like armor. The guards at the door looked startled, then alarmed. One spoke urgently into a radio while the other moved to block her path. I'm here to see Kang Ji-hoon, she announced. Tell him Amara Chen doesn't wait for invitations. The guard's hand moved toward his weapon, but a voice crackled through his earpiece. His expression shifted from aggression to uncertainty. Mr. Kang will see you, he said stiffly, stepping aside. Top floor. Private elevator. The Frost Club was everything Amara had expected and worse, a monument to excess and power. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, casting prismatic light across marble floors. Beautiful people in designer clothes lounged on velvet sofas, their laughter brittle and performative. The air smelled of expensive cologne and barely concealed desperation. This was where Seoul's elite came to pretend they weren't afraid of the man who really controlled their city. The elevator was mirrored on all sides. Amara watched her reflection multiply infinitely as she rose, a slim African woman in a simple blue dress, natural hair pulled back, minimal makeup, standing among endless copies of herself. An army of Amaras, all terrified, all determined not to show it. The doors opened directly into an office that occupied the entire top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Busan's glittering harbor. The decor was minimalist, almost austere, black leather, chrome, and glass. Nothing soft, nothing warm. A room designed to intimidate. Kang Ji-hoon stood by the windows, his back to her, hands clasped behind him. He didn't turn when she entered. For a long moment, there was only silence and the muted sounds of the city far below. "You have remarkable courage," he said finally, his voice carrying easily across the space. "Or remarkable stupidity. I haven't decided which. Does it matter?" Amara replied, echoing his words from their first meeting. "I'm here. Talk." Now he turned, and the impact of his full attention was like a physical blow. In the restaurant, she'd been angry, adrenaline-fueled, righteous. Here, in his territory, with no witnesses and no escape, the reality of what she was doing crashed over her like a wave. But she held his gaze. She'd learned long ago that looking away was surrender. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "What do you want from me?" He moved toward her with that unsettling grace, each step measured and deliberate. "Want from you? Miss Chen, I want you to understand your place in the order of things." "My place?" Anger sparked through her fear. "My place is in my restaurant, running my business, living my life. I didn't ask to be part of your world. You entered my world the moment you disrespected me in front of my men." He was close now, too close. She could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive, cedar and ice. "Do you know what happens to people who do that?" "I'm sure you're about to tell me." "They disappear, Miss Chen. Or they learn to bow. Those are the only options in my city." "Then I'll be the exception," Amara said, though her heart was trying to beat out of her chest. "Because I don't bow. Not anymore. Not ever again." Something flickered in his eyes, curiosity, perhaps, or recognition. "Who hurt you?" he asked, and the question was so unexpected, so precisely aimed at her most tender wound, that she actually flinched. "That's none of your business. Everything in the city is my business." He circled her slowly, like a shark assessing prey. "You carry yourself like someone who's been broken before. But broken things either stay shattered or they forge themselves into something harder. Which are you, I wonder?" "Hard enough that your threats don't work on me," Amara shot back, turning to keep him in her line of sight. "Hard enough that I'll fight you every single day until you get bored and move on to easier targets." "Easier targets." He laughed, a low sound without humor. "Do you think I've stayed in power for 10 years by choosing easy targets? I have politicians in my pocket, Miss Chen. I have judges who rule in my favor and police who look the other way. I could have your restaurant condemned tomorrow. I could have you deported on fabricated charges. I could make you disappear so completely that even your friend Mincio would forget your name within a year. Then why haven't you?" The question came out before she could stop it, genuine curiosity overriding caution. He stopped circling, standing directly in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "Because I find you interesting," he said softly. "Because in 10 years, no one has looked at me the way you do, like I'm just a man. Not a king. Not a monster. Just a man who needs to learn some manners." "You're just a man," Amara replied. "A man who's forgotten that power without respect is just tyranny. A man who's so used to fear that he doesn't know what to do when someone refuses to give it to him." His jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought she'd gone too far, that he'd prove all the rumors true and she'd never leave this office alive. But then, impossibly, he smiled, a real smile that transformed his face from ice sculpture to something almost human. "Have dinner with me," he said. "One dinner. Somewhere public, civilized. And I'll restore your suppliers, remove my men from your restaurant, leave you alone. Why would you do that? Because I want to understand you. Because you've done something no one else has managed in a decade. You've made me curious. Amara studied him, searching for the trap, the hidden agenda. Men like him didn't make offers without expecting something in return. But she was also pragmatic. Her savings were dwindling. The stress was affecting her sleep, her health. One dinner was a small price to pay for peace, wasn't it? One dinner, she agreed finally. Somewhere public. And then you leave me alone. Completely. Forever. If that's still what you want after dinner, he said, then yes. It will be. We'll see. He gestured toward the elevator. Tomorrow night. 8 o'clock. I'll send a car. I'll meet you there. I don't get into cars sent by men I don't trust. Another flicker of that almost smile. Smart. The Sapphire Room. Harbor District. Do you know it? I'll find it. I'm sure you will. He walked her to the elevator, pressed the button. As the doors began to close, he added, "Wear something nice, Miss Chen. Not for me, for yourself. You deserve beautiful things." The comment, so unexpected and oddly genuine, left her speechless as the elevator descended. The Sapphire Room was exactly the kind of place Amara had expected, exclusive, expensive, and intimidating. A restaurant where a single meal cost more than most people's monthly salary, where the wealthy came to be seen and the powerful came to make deals over Wagyu beef and aged wine. The maitre d' took one look at Amara in her emerald dress, borrowed from Mincio, who'd insisted she couldn't show up in her usual practical clothes, and his expression shifted from professional courtesy to genuine warmth. "Miss Chen, Mr. Kang is expecting you. This way, please." He led her through the main dining room, past tables of designer-clad patrons who glanced up with idle curiosity, to a private section overlooking the harbor. The entire area had been reserved. Just one table, set for two, with candles and white roses and a view of the water that would have stolen her breath if she'd allowed herself to appreciate it. Kang Ji-hoon stood when she approached. He was in a dark suit, simpler than what he'd worn before, but it fit him perfectly. Without his entourage, without the trappings of power, he looked younger. Almost vulnerable, though Amara knew that was probably an illusion. "You came," he said, and she detected genuine surprise in his voice. "I keep my word," Amara replied, allowing him to pull out her chair. "Unlike some people." "Your suppliers were restored this morning," he said, taking his own seat. "I keep my word too." They ordered, or rather, Ji-hoon ordered a tasting menu that the chef apparently prepared only for special guests. Amara wanted to protest the presumption, but the first course arrived before she could, and despite herself, she was impressed. The food was extraordinary, each dish a small work of art. "Tell me about your restaurant," Ji-hoon said after they'd eaten in surprisingly comfortable silence for several minutes. "Why, Mama's table?" Amara hesitated, and used a genuine interest from someone like him. "My grandmother raised me," she said finally. "In Nairobi. My parents worked constantly, so she was the one who taught me to cook, to see food as love made tangible. Her table was where everyone gathered, family, neighbors, strangers who needed a meal. She used to say that a shared table makes enemies into friends." She smiled sadly. "She died before I could bring her here, show her what I built." "She would have been proud," Ji-hoon said quietly. "Would she? I'm not sure. She believed in community, in bringing people together. I left everyone behind. Ran away like a coward. Running from danger isn't cowardice. It's survival." Amara's eyes snapped to his face. "What makes you think I was running from danger?" "Because I recognize the signs. The way you scan every room for exits. The way you never sit with your back to the door. The way you flinch when men move too quickly." His voice was gentle, but his eyes were sharp. "Someone hurt you badly. And you came here to become someone he couldn't find." She should have been angry at his presumption, at the invasion of her privacy. Instead, She felt seen in a way that was both terrifying and strangely comforting. His name was David, she heard herself say. We married young. I thought I loved him. By the end, I was just trying to survive him. Did he let you go? He didn't have a choice. I waited until he was traveling, took what I could carry, and disappeared. He looked for me, I know he did. But South Korea was far enough, different enough. I became someone new here. You became yourself, Ji-hoon corrected. The woman in your restaurant, that's who you really are. Strong. Fearless. Protective of what's yours. I'm not fearless. I'm terrified most of the time. I just refuse to let terror make my decisions anymore. He leaned forward, his intensity focused entirely on her. That's what courage is, Miss Chen. Not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let it control you. He paused, something shifting in his expression. May I tell you something I've never told anyone? Amara nodded, uncertain where this was going. I grew up in an orphanage. A bad one, the kind where the strong survive and the weak disappear. I learned early that power was everything, that if you weren't the predator, you were prey. So I became the most ruthless predator in every room. I built an empire on fear because fear was the only language I knew. He stared out at the harbor, his profile sharp in the candlelight. For 10 years, no one has challenged me. No one has looked at me and seen anything but the monster I've become. Until you. What do I see? Amara asked softly. A man who's forgotten how to be human, he replied. A man who's so used to controlling everything that he doesn't know what to do when someone refuses to be controlled. Is that why I interest you? Because I said no. You interest me because you see me clearly and still refuse to fear me. Because you protect your people the way I protect mine. Because you've built something beautiful from nothing, just as I have, but yours brings joy and mine brings only fear. He turned back to her, and the raw honesty in his eyes stole her breath. You asked what I want from you, Miss Chen. I want to understand how you stayed human. I want to know if it's too late for me to remember how. Before Amara could respond, Ji-hoon's phone buzzed urgently. He glanced at it, and his expression went from vulnerable to lethal in an instant. I have to go, he said, standing abruptly. Business. I'm sorry. What kind of business requires? The kind you don't want to know about. He signaled for his driver, then turned back to her. Stay here. Finish your meal. The car will take you home safely. I don't need. Please. The single word, spoken with unexpected gentleness, stopped her protest. Let me do this one thing. Let me keep you safe. He left before she could argue, moving with that predatory grace, his phone already at his ear, speaking rapid Korean in a tone that promised violence. Amara sat alone in the beautiful room, her meal half-eaten, her mind spinning. She should leave. Should call a taxi, go home, forget this dangerous man and his dangerous world. Instead, she stayed. She finished her meal, tasting nothing. She accepted the ride from his driver, a silent man who delivered her to her apartment without incident. And that night, lying in bed, she couldn't stop thinking about the loneliness in Ji-hoon's eyes, the hunger for connection in someone who'd forgotten how to connect. She was in trouble. The kind of trouble that didn't end well. Because despite everything, despite his threats, his power, his violence, she'd seen the man beneath the monster. And worse, she'd liked what she'd seen. At 3 a.m, her phone rang. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Miss Chen. Ji-hoon's voice was rough, tired. I'm outside your restaurant. There's been an incident. You need to come now. Amara's blood went cold. She threw on clothes and ran. The scene that greeted Amara made her legs nearly give out. The front window of Mama's table was shattered, glass scattered across the sidewalk like deadly diamonds under the streetlights. The door hung crooked on its hinges. And spray-painted across her beautiful brick wall in violent red letters, Kang's Whore. Ji-hoon stood amid the destruction, his suit jacket discarded, his white shirt streaked with what looked like blood, though whether his or someone else's, Amara couldn't tell. 3 of his men surrounded him, speaking urgently in low voices. When he saw her, his expression shifted from cold fury to something almost like regret. "I'm sorry," he said, and she'd never heard those words sound so genuine, so heavy with meaning. This was Choi Dae-young, my rival. He wanted to send a message. A message. Amara's voice was hollow as she stepped through the broken door. The interior was worse. Tables overturned, chairs smashed, her grandmother's pictures torn from the walls. 5 years of work, of hope, of rebuilding herself, destroyed in minutes. She knelt, picking up a broken frame that held her grandmother's photo. The glass had spiderwebbed across the old woman's smiling face. "I'll fix this," Ji-hoon said, moving toward her. "I'll have it restored by tomorrow. Better than before. I'll get out." Her voice was quiet, but it cut through his words like a knife. "Amara, get out." She whirled on him, clutching the broken frame to her chest. "This is your world. Your violence. Your stupid, pointless wars over territory and respect and power. I wanted nothing to do with it, but you couldn't leave me alone. You had to be curious. You had to make me visible to your enemies. And now look. Look what your interest has cost me. You think I wanted this?" His voice rose to match hers. "You think I don't know what I've done? Dae-jung's men came here to hurt you, Amara. They were going to do more than break windows. They were going to wait for you, too." He stopped, jaw clenched. "I got here in time. Barely. So I should thank you? Thank you for saving me from the danger you created." "No." He ran a hand through his hair, and she saw his hand was shaking. "No, you should hate me. You should tell me to leave and never come back. That would be the smart thing. Then why are you still standing here?" "Because I can't." The admission seemed torn from somewhere deep inside him. "Because for 10 years I've felt nothing, and then you looked at me like I was just a man who needed better manners, and suddenly I feel everything. Because you're in danger now and it's my fault, and the only way to keep you safe is to keep you close, but keeping you close means pulling you deeper into this world, and He stopped, breathing hard. "I don't know what to do. For the first time in a decade, I don't know what to do." Amara stared at him, this powerful man who ruled through fear, looking lost and desperate in the ruins of her restaurant. She should send him away. Should rebuild alone, disappear again if necessary, start over somewhere he'd never find her. It was the pattern she knew, the survival instinct that had kept her alive. But she was so tired of running. So tired of letting violent men dictate the shape of her life. "You want to keep me safe?" she asked. "Then teach me to fight back. Not with guns or violence, but with strategy. With power. You built an empire, teach me to protect mine." He looked at her as if she'd suggested something impossible. "You want to enter my world?" "I want to stop being a victim in anyone's world," she corrected. "I'm done running, Ji-hoon. Done hiding. Done hoping that if I'm quiet and small enough, dangerous men will leave me alone. They never do. So if I'm going to be a target anyway, I might as well be a target who can fight back." "You don't know what you're asking." "Then show me." She stepped closer, glass crunching under her shoes. "You said you wanted to understand how I stayed human. Maybe I need to understand how you became what you are. Maybe we can teach each other." "I could destroy you," he warned, but his voice was gentle. "You could try," she replied. "But I'm harder to break than I look. And maybe you need someone in your life who isn't afraid to tell you when you're wrong. Maybe that's what keeps people human. Having someone who sees them clearly and stays anyway." The silence stretched between them, filled with broken glass and impossible possibilities. Finally, Ji-hoon spoke. "If we do this, if you come into my world, there are rules. You stay close. You listen when I tell you something is dangerous. You let me protect you, not because you're weak, but because I can't." His voice cracked slightly. "I can't lose you. Not now that I've found you. And you listen when I tell you something is wrong. You don't make decisions about my life without asking me. You treat me as a partner, not a possession." She held his gaze. "Can you do that? Can the Frost King share power?" I don't know, he admitted. But for you, I'll try. They stood in the ruins of her restaurant as dawn began to break over Busan, two damaged people choosing each other despite every logical reason not to. It wasn't safe. It wasn't smart. But safety and logic had never brought either of them anything but loneliness. Help me clean up, Amara said finally. And then take me to meet this Choi Daejang. If I'm going to be part of your world, I should know my enemies. Jihoon's smile was sharp and dangerous and proud. You're going to be magnificent, he said. I already am, Amara replied. You're just finally noticing. 3 months later, Mama's table reopened. Bigger, more beautiful, but with the same warmth at its heart. Amara moved through the dinner rush with practiced ease, greeting regulars and newcomers with equal warmth. At the corner table, her table now, sat Kang Ji-hoon, reviewing documents but looking up frequently to watch her work. When she brought him his meal, something she'd cooked specially, he tasted it and smiled. Perfect, he said. I know, she replied, and bent to kiss him quickly before returning to her customers. She'd learned his world, the strategy, the power plays, the careful balance of fear and respect. He'd learned hers, the value of community, of building rather than just taking, of using power to protect rather than just control. Neither had changed completely. He was still dangerous, she was still defiant. But together, they'd forged something new. The African lady who dared to talk back to a Korean mafia king hadn't just survived. She'd thrived. And the Frost King had discovered that ice, when it met the right fire, didn't melt, it transformed into something stronger than either element alone. In Mama's table, where a shared table made enemies into friends, two impossible people had found their unlikely home. The end.